Hey, welcome to the third exercise. This is a combination of all the transformations we learned in 1 and 2. So we're going to start with that parent graph of a graph we've seen already. This is y equals x squared. We're just going to name this y equals f of x. It doesn't really matter, but it is actually y equals x squared. And we're going to sketch the graph of y equals to negative 2 x minus 1 squared plus 3. Okay, so let's try to find the transformations in that sketch, or in that equation, sorry. So here there's a negative, right? It's a negative outside. So what that negative does is it reflects the parabola. So now it'll be facing down. So that'd be the first transformation. So that'd be a reflection over the x-axis. And then you'd have a 2 here, and that would be a vertical stretch. Again, outside of the bracket, so it doesn't attach to the x, it's outside. So it would be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. So normally the points would be here. So sorry, the points would be here. But because of the 2, the points would be here. So it would be a little bit thinner. So but because it's pointing down, you'd have these 2 points down here. We have a movement of 1 to the right and 3 up. And that's what the resulting graph would look like. So you'd have about the same shape, right? You'd have the reflection facing down. You'd have the stretch, so it's a little bit thinner than before. Before it was like this, and now it's a little bit thinner. 1 to the right, so now the vertex is 1 to the right and 3 up. So that's where the vertex is. Okay, so just to name all those transformations, that's translation 1 unit to the right, reflection over the x-axis, a vertical stretch by a factor of 2, translation 3 units up. Okay, and normally what I do is I would say put them in order. So we're going to actually number these to say which order they would go. Whenever you do transformations, you go starting left, moving this way, just to make sure you get the proper order. So this would be the first one you would do, right? This would be the second transformation. This would be the third, and then that would be the fourth, according to the left to right rule that I'm going to keep consistent with. Okay, so another equation for this function, if you were to just write these transformations, would be, okay, taking a look at that, you'd have, if the original function is f of x, you'd have y equals to negative 2 f of x minus 1 plus 3. So this would be the function, okay, with the transformations, so the reflection, the stretch, the translation right 1, and 3 up. Okay, so those two would be equivalent. Okay, so as mentioned in the previous page, the order is important. I'm going to stay consistent, and I'm going to move left to right. So I'm always going to do this transformation first, second, third, and fourth, just to go over what they do again. This is vertical, right? This would affect the vertical, so this would affect y values. See this b here? It's inside the large bracket, so this b is attached with the x. This b here represents any stretch or compression on x. This h is the translation left to right, and this k is translation up and down. Notice that we did factor b in x minus h, and I would recommend doing that every single time you're doing transformations, and we will see that as the notes and the course goes along. Okay, so given the graph here, so we have given the graph f of x, I want to do the following transformation. So notice, okay, right here in the first one, this 2 is outside of the f of x, so this is a multiplication of y by 2, so it's a vertical stretch, and that's a vertical translation. Always left to right, so you have to do, in this case, have to do the multiplication by 2, and then subtract 1 to follow the order of operations. So the first step would be multiplied by 2, so your first step would be all the y values. I'm just going to put circles into the new points. So the y values were negative 1, so it becomes negative 2. The y value over here is 1, so it becomes 2. And the y value here is 0, so it stays at 0. Notice it would stay at 0 there too. So that's our new graph, but we still haven't done this transformation, so I'm going to do the minus 1 still. And that minus 1 is going down 1, right? So now all these points, I'm going to put a solid point here to show that it's a final point. All of these points would be final, and this would be our new graph. Oh, sorry, I missed the dot there. That's about right. Okay, so not too hard, not too bad. Okay, for the second one, all right, going through the transformations again. This is a reflection, and this is negative y. So all the y values that are negative become positive. So this is reflection over the x-axis, so up and down. Okay, so all the points would get reflected. So again, I'll do the same thing. So this would be an open point, open point, open point, and notice those points don't change. And then this part over here, this is a shift 2 to the right, translation 2 to the right. So all these points get shifted. So this first point here gets shifted to where that one is. So we're going to put a solid red circle there. The second one goes over here. This point shifts over here, and over here. And this is our new graph. Okay, so basically it's just making sure that you follow the right steps in order and that you know what these transformations do. So it's a combination of the two that we did from previous lessons. And the last two, so in C over here, notice there's a 2x plus 2, and if you look back at our formula that had to be factored out, so we want to factor out this this bracket here as much as we can. You'd like to have a 1 in front of your x. So for C, it is easier to factor out the 2 before transforming the graph. Therefore, y would equal to f of 2 times x plus 1. Okay, so you notice that this 2 is still inside the large bracket, but it's factored out from the x plus 1. And don't forget, it becomes plus 1 because we factored out the 2 from both factors. If you were to multiply that in, that'd be 2x plus 2. All right, so now we're just going to follow these transformations as shown. If you remember what this 2 does when it's multiplied by the x, it actually divides all the x's by 2. So the first one, if the point was at -2, -1, the new point will be -1, -1, because the x divided by 2. x0 doesn't change, x2 becomes x1, x3 becomes 1.5 over here. Okay? And then, don't forget, there's another transformation. This is 1 to the left. This is translation 1 to the left. So, everything moves over 1. And I'm going to make solid dots because, well, that's our final graph. And there we go. Okay? So again, get rid of that tail. Again, factor out this 2, and then you can order the same, follow the same order of operations as you did before. Notice that you will do the 2 before the 1, so you're going to do the stretch or compression before you do the translation. Okay, and then the last one over here, okay, the first transformation, this is a reflection, and all the x values become positive and negative, so it's like this. So it's a reflection over the y-axis. So the first thing we do is all the points get flipped over. So that's a point here, that's a point there, that point stays where it is, and that point goes over here. So that's just the 4 major points. And then the last translation, simply 1 up, right? So all the points get moved, moved up 1. And there's our final graph. Okay? So describe the order of transformations that are required to transform the graph of y equals f of x. So imagine you have any graph, and you need to sketch this graph. So I just want to know what are all the steps. Note, there's a note here. Notice that there's a number in front of the x that's not 1, it's -1. That's the coefficient of x. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor that coefficient, and that's going to be consistent throughout the whole course. So get used to this. Anytime you see a number in front of the x when you're doing graphs, factor this number. So we're going to say factor, and what's that going to give us? That's going to give us y equals to -3 f of -1 x minus 1. So don't forget you factored out this -1. So this is now a -1. So if you were to distribute, it would be the same thing. And then plus 4. Okay? All right. So there are 5 transformations that need to be done. Again, we're going to go left to right. Okay? So the first one here, there's a negative here. That is the reflection. Okay? So the first one is reflection over, and I hope you remember, this affects the y, so it's vertical, right? So it means it's over the x-axis. That would be the first transformation you would do. And then what this 3 does, that is a vertical stretch. So we're going to have a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Okay, now we have another reflection. That is the reflection over the y-axis. The x's becomes negative and positive. So this is a reflection over the y-axis. Okay, and then we have the last two, the kind of easier ones, right? So this is a translation 1 to the right, and this is a translation 4 up. So translation 1 right, and we're going to have another translation of 4 up. And all those would combine, all these transformations would combine to sketch the new graph. Good luck with exercise 3, where it's a combination, so be careful. There'll be some questions a little bit harder, and you need to make sure that you have this equation ready to go before you sketch the graph. See you in class.